Parshas Ve'eda, the Parsha of the Makos, almost all of them, the majority. The Makos took almost about a year from when they began until they ended. Rashi goes with the opinion in Medrash that by each Makkah, Moshe would warn for 3/4 of a month, and the last quarter of the month, last week, was the actual Makkah. So if each one is 4 weeks, about 10 months for all the Makkahs. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah that 6 months before we left Mitzrayim, we left during Nisan. So 6 months before, during Tishrei, the servitude stopped. We no longer were answering to the Egyptians. We were in charge of ourselves. And that's why you wonder, most of the Yidden didn't want to leave Mitzrayim, to the point, like Rashi goes, that 4/5 of the Jews died in Mitzrayim. Why? Because they didn't want to leave. And you wonder, how could the Yidden not want to leave? After suffering at the hands of the Mitzrayim for years and years, what are the Yidden thinking? And the answer is very simple. Life was just getting good. Life was just starting to work out. For years, they were being brutalized by the Mitzrayim. Finally, we're going to see during the Makkah of Dam, they became wealthy. And 3 or 4 Makkahs in, the Tishrei, 6 months before we left, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, Shibud servitude was over. Yidden were finally they're able to enjoy life. And now Moshe says, give it all up. Come with me in the desert. You can imagine why many Yidden didn't want to leave. Life is finally good. Dasan va'aviram led the movement that were the antagonists against Moshe. According to some, the Rosh and others, the Dasan va'aviram were part of a group of shoitrim, the Yidden that worked to make bricks. They were, each group, there was a Jew nominated to look after them, the shoiter. And if the Jews didn't cough up the requisite amount of bricks, then the shoiter was supposed to leash out on the Jews, and when they wouldn't, the Egyptians would pour their anger upon them. Vayuku shoitri Yisrael, the Yiddish officers were hit. Dasan va'aviram were amongst them. They were good people. They couldn't appreciate Moshe. They said, Moshe, you didn't suffer in Mitzrayim. You grew up in the house of Paro, a prince. You're off in Cush. You're waging wars in Cush. You're in Midian. And now you come here. Where have you been? You've never suffered like us. We suffered. We had our backs broken. And now you want to take us out. So part of that movement was Yidden that had suffered for years in Egypt. Life was suddenly getting good. And Moshe says, come, it's time to go out. We're going to the desert. The Yidden are like, we don't want to go. Who are you? We've suffered enough to be able to enjoy life a little bit. And that gives a bit of an understanding of why the vast majority, 80% of Jews, didn't want to leave.
I saw another
yeah.
Ezra. It says that the Jews had a slave mentality.
Right.
Not that they didn't want to leave. They couldn't fathom after so much persecution
that
it was possible to be free.
Right.
But Moshe, because he didn't do it, he was able to say,
that's
no,
why he had
you are really the Abish's kids. You're supposed to be free, and he had to inspire them to be free. That's why he couldn't. That's why because
he couldn't grow up. He couldn't grow up.
He didn't know what's,
He dafka had to come from the outside.
So it was a little different.
Yeah. Well, that's
they liked it. He just like slave
mentality. Well, that explains why the Abish orchestrated that Moshe grew up on the outskirts. But many of the Yidden didn't.
I just happened to.
Right, yeah. The Ibn Ezra also says.
Both can be merged.
No. That
wanted to
one is the truth of the matter. One is the feelings of the average Jew. The average Jew said, Moshe, that's where you've been all these years. You didn't suffer like we did.
The reason why they didn't want to leave because they were liking it, because they were slave mentality.
No, that's already.
They had to claim the hasagas.
Okay, that's already to say that they didn't imagine they could look at. All right, I don't know if that's.
The idea of full freedom was not.
Real
that the Bechal didn't want to leave.
Want to leave.
They wouldn't have been able to create the redemption. But once Moshe was doing it, l'chayra, even Ibn Ezra would agree the Yidden would have.
Only 20% got into the headspace.
I don't know if the Ibn Ezra goes with those 20%. It's a medrash. Anyhow, I'll call upon him. The other thing, by the way, is there's a statement called Ein Novi Be'iroi. You can't be a prophet in your own city. That's a Gemara, right. But there's another idea of that's the Ein Chovish Matu would be like what he said. Had Moshe grown up amongst them, he would have also had the slave mentality. But there's another idea. You can't be a prophet in your own city. The Chassam Sofer says it's a statement from Chazal. No one's ever found it. It is, the Goyim have it in their sources about Yoshka. That Yoshka came into Beis Lechem. He walked into the shul, he gave a prophecy. And the Yidden said, we remember when you were running around as a kid, making a mess in the shul. Now mitamol, you're a Navi. So he said, Yoshka said, you can't be a Navi in your own city. The Chassam Sofer said it's from Chazal, no one's ever found where. So the Ibn Ezra says, had Moshe grown up amongst the Yidden, and now he comes to redeem us, Yidden like, we remember when you were running around as a kid, sitting in the principal's office. Now you're doch the Redeemer, you're the big Redeemer. Anyhow, Kapanim. So, fine.
Moshe was in jail for 10 years.
Yeah, Hagim Yonason, in Midian, yeah. Yeah, but
If
no one
you
knew
say-
about that. Who knew about that?
I know.
We only found out 1,000 years later.
Exactly. One of the greatest, right. So the Makos lasted roughly about 10 months, fine. There's a whole shaila. Moshe Rabbeinu it says he was 80 years old when he stood in front of Paroi. That was before the Makos began. If they lasted about a year, then he would have had a birthday, Zayin Adar. In fact, he would have had a birthday right before we left. We left Nisan. He would have been 81 when we left. The problem is we were in the desert for exactly 40 years.
And it was 120.
So he would have been 121, but the Torah says he's only 120.
Right.
So the Rebbe in some Ha'aris asked the Shaila. The Chassam Sofer deals with it already. He says when Moshe stood in front of Paroi, he was in his 80th year. He was 79, the 80th year. He had his 80th birthday a month before we left. And he went out, and then exactly 40 years later, he turned 120. So when the Torah says he was 80 years when he stood in front of Paroi, he was actually 79, the 80th year. Anyhow, Al Koponim, you have these 10 Makos. The Rebbe in a Sikha discusses that the Makos generally had 3 purposes. And he bases on Psukim. Purpose number 1, Paroi said he doesn't know God. So the Abish is like, you're going to find out very, very soon who I am and what I'm capable of doing. Number 2 is to punish the Mitzrayim. Because they needed to suffer consequences for their actions. Hashem told Avram by the covenant of the parts in Parshas Lech Lecha, the bris ben Absarim, the games hagoya she'avodu, the goyim that harassed the Yidden, I'll judge them. And Rashi there says the 10 Makos. That's point number 2. The Mitzrayim must suffer the consequences of their actions. Point number 3 says the Rebbe, it was for the Yidden to see God. The Yidden had suffered so much. Life was so dark. The Eibishter wanted that they should see godliness as well. Those are the 3 purposes. So the shaila is, when the Makos Taka came upon the Egyptians, were the Yidden affected? This is our segue into our discussion. Did the Yidden suffer from the Makos? Why would you think they should? Well, based on this vort of the Rebbe, that there's 3 aspects to the Makos, and one of them is for the Yidden to see the might of God. Maybe they have to feel it, maybe you got to experience it firsthand. If they're living in Goshen and nothing's happening there, it's all happening elsewhere, and they don't see it, the message isn't going to be properly delivered with the strength it would have if they would actually experience it. But you wonder, what? The Yidden would have been suffered by the Makos? How could you say such a thing? So let's see right away. It's a major debate. Number 1, we begin with Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina, the Rishon, Rabbeinu Yoina. He, in his commentary on Pirkei Avos, it says in Pirkei Avos, Asora nisim nasu laviseinu b'Mitzrayim. Our forefathers had 10 miracles while they were in Egypt. What were the 10 miracles? What miracles happened to them when they were in Mitzrayim? So Rabbeinu Yoina says the fact that each Makkah, they were spared. That was a miraculous event. It happened all around them, didn't touch them. It happened 10 times. Look at Rabbeinu Yoina, number 1. Asar Nisim happened to our fathers in Mitzrayim. By all the 10 Makos that Hashem brought on the Egyptians, Loi Nizku Aviseinu Bem, the Yidden were not affected. Ubekulam Umefurish Lehem. By each of the Makos it's clear, except for one. By Makos Kinim, by the third one, it says the Kinim was Ba'adam, by man. The law Yefrishat Torah doesn't distinguish by the Egyptians or the Jews. Ella, so says Rabbeinu Yonah, you're right. The Torah is ambiguous by Kinim, but Kabbalah, it's a tradition in the Yad of the Chachamim that even by Kinim we weren't affected. Azoi Zak Rabbeinu Yonah. Look in number 2, the Bartenura. The Bartenura is a little bit after Rabbeinu Yonah. Bartenura is in the 1400s. Right, he's known today as the great winemaker. For some reason, all of these like wines. There's a Rashi wine, there's a Kanadi, there's a Rambam wine, there's a Rif wine. I was once in yeshiva and we had all these wines in front of us: a Rambam wine, a Rashi wine, a Rif. And so someone said, "How come there's no Chasam Sofer wine?" I said, "Look at the hechsher. Each one has a hechsher called Chasam Sofer." Anyhow, the Bartenura, who is Avadia, it's the Rav Avadia Bartenura, lived in Italy, as his name suggests. The foremost commentary on Mishnayos and on Pirkei Avos, he says the same thing. You know what the 10 miracles were? Shenitzoylu me'eser Makos, that they were saved from all 10. All of them were by the Egyptians, not by the Jews. Okay? The Meiri, in his commentary on Pirkei Avos, says the same thing. The 10 Makos, none of them touched the Jews. So you would think it seems that all the Rishonim are saying the same thing. Not so fast. Look at the Rambam in number 3. This is the Rambam's commentary on Pirkei Avos. Avoli says, what were the 10 miracles? Hayud Nisim that happened to our fathers in Mitzrayim. What are the 10 miracles? Hinotzlam, the fact they were spared from the 10 Makos. Veheyos kol Mako v'Mako, since each Mako was miyuchedes b'Mitzrayim, was by the Egyptians and not by the Jews. And these are miracles without a doubt. In other words, the fact that the occurrences happened all over Egypt except for the land of Goshen, that's a miracle each time. Now, says the Rambam, how do we know that this is the fact? I mean, the Mishnah is saying, but how did the Chazal know Taka happened? V'loshen haTorah b'chol Mako u'Mako. Look at the description in the Psukim in this week's parasha. By each Makkah that the Eibishter brought on the Egyptian, milvad Makas Kinim. He says it's clear by all the Makkas, it's pretty clear that it's only the Egyptians, except for Kinim, like Rabbeinu Yonah said in number 1. But here's where the Rambam veers away. He says, by Kinim, Shaloi Birze, the Torah doesn't say that, the Torah says Kinim was Ba'adam, mashma all men. Says the Rambam, the Kinim Taka came to the land of Goshen, they were there. Ella, but it's Yodua, it's known, Shaloi Onash Yisrael, wasn't a punishment. The lice were there, but it didn't bother them. So have the rabbis explained. Wherever he got that from. So the Rambam says that 9 of the Makkas B'chal didn't touch the Jews. Kinim came, but it didn't harass them, wasn't mitzar them, wasn't painful. So what does that mean? There were lice everywhere, but I guess it didn't...
They had immunity against it.
There's a Rashi in Parshas Vayechi who quotes from a medrash that Yankov tells his sons, Yosef, don't bury me in Egypt. Take me to Maras HaMachpelah. And Rashi, in one of his explanations, quotes from the medrash that Yaakov said, I know in the future all of the earth around here will turn into Kinim, and they're going to fly around under my body. Now, had Yaakov been buried in Mitzrayim, where would he have been buried?
Goshen.
In Goshen, the Jewish. So according to Rabbeinu Yonah and the Bartenura and the Meiri, that Kinim also didn't touch the Jews. What was Yaakov saying? What was he talking about?
On the ground is different.
Why didn't he do it?
Well, under the ground, Goshen's Goshen. See, under the ground,
Why did he pull a Yosef and get buried in the Nile?
Sorry?
Pull the Yosef and get buried in the Nile.
Okay, the Nile's going to turn to blood.
Camp.
Yeah, you know. Nile's full of crocodiles. But Rabbeinu Hanano learns that Sfardim are crocodiles.
Some of the pictures they have.
Yeah. They were crocodiles. Some learned there were 2 things. There was crocodiles and there were frogs. But Rabbeinu Hanano learns there were crocodiles. There's actually a medrash that says that the Egyptians had issues with crocodiles for years. And when Yirmiyah came there, after the story of Gedaliah, when Gedaliah was killed by the Jew, and the Yidden scrammed from Israel, fearing the wrath of Nebuchadnezzar, they ran to Egypt. And when Yirmiyah came, the crocodile problem stopped. And the Mitzrayim loved Yirmiyah. the Yidden hated Yirmiyah because he kept on telling them, you came to Egypt, God's going to punish you, Nebuchadnezzar will come here and kill you, and he ultimately did. There's a medrash that says the Jews killed Yirmiyah in Mitzrayim, and they didn't bury him. The Egyptians buried him out of a debt of gratitude because he solved the crocodile issue. And they buried him, and when Alexander the Great created the city Alexandria, he moved the remains of Yirmiyah from where they were buried originally to Alexandria. It's written in an old medrash. That's the Arizal holds Yirmiyah was buried in Yerushalayim. There's lots of opinions, but there is such a medrash that says this. Anyhow, back to our thing over here. So the Yankiv was afraid that the earth will turn into Kinim. According to the Rambam, it could make sense. The Rambam says there was lice in Goshen, but it wasn't attaching itself to the people, wasn't harassing them, but they were there. So maybe Yankiv was just saying, I know that the earth will turn into Kinim, and I don't want to be here when that happens, you know. They're going to be, they're going to tickle me, they're not going to cleave to me.
They're going to crawl all over.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that, in other words, that medrash could fit very well with this vort of the Rambam. Mm-hmm. But according to the Bartenura and the Rebbe and the Meiri, that Kinim didn't go to Goshen, so you wonder what was Yankiv worried about. Fine. But the Machlokes here, the Rambam, it's a subtlety. It's pretty much the Rambam's also in the same ballpark as the other Rishonim, that the Yidden were spared.
Maybe there were zoning laws over there. You can't bury anybody.
Comes the Ibn Ezra number 4, maybe. Okay. Comes the Ibn Ezra in this week's Parsha, and the Ibn Ezra says we've got it all wrong. In number 4, he's speaking about the Makkah of blood. Vayachparu. Says the Ibn Ezra. The Torah says that the water turned into blood. We're going to see some fascinating things in Mitzvah Shem on our journey. So let's get going. The Torah says the water turned into blood. All the fish died. And the water became toxic for 7 days. And during those 7 days, the Mitzrayim were digging to get water from underneath the ground. Right. And were they successful or not, we'll see. But says the Ibn Ezra, number 4, so we're on the left side over there. Rabbim Oimrim, many believe, Ki hamayim hoyu biyad ha-Mitzri adumim kadam, that the water, when the Mitzri had the water, it was red like blood. V'nislabnu biyad ha-Yisraeli. But when a Yid would get hold of it, it would turn into regular water. And we'll come back to that opinion later. Says the Ibn Ezra, I think it's rubbish. He says, Im kain, if so, lama loy nichtav oiseh b'Torah. If it's true, like every kid learns, and the Medrash Rabbah actually says that if a Jew and a Mitzri drank from the same cup, for the Jew was water, the Mitzri was dam, how come there's no mention in the Chumash? Ulefi dait, he says, Ibn Ezra, if you ask me, I think the Jews suffered by Makos dam just like the Egyptians. And it wasn't Makos dam, and the Tzfardim, and the Kinim were koilelis, the Egyptians and the Yidden. The first 3 were equal for the Yidden and the Goyim. Ki achar kosev nirdif. Because look at the psukim. Only later, when it comes to Orov and Dever, the Eibishter says clearly, I'm going to separate. Hashem doesn't say what.
Rambam says each one is clear.
So okay, so we'll see in number 5 the Radvas. We'll get to that. But as far as Ibn Ezra says, listen, there's many levels of clear. Like by Tzfardeya, it's Moshe says the frogs will go into you, into your nation, into your people. Does that clearly mean not the Jews? Or no, but Moshe just wasn't going to tell that to Paro. In other words, how do you judge clarity? By Orav and Dever, the Torah, by Orav Hashem says, I'm going to make a separation. So says the Ibn Ezra, Ve'elu Asholish, you know why the Yidden suffered from the first 3? No, Ma'ati Ziku Nishkeferlech, it was a small damage. But Makos ha'Orav, which was the wild animals, that was awful. Hashem Hifrish, there God divided between the Egyptians and the Jews. And so to Dever, which was the plague, the Torah says clearly no animals died by the Jews. Borod as well, Bavur Mikneim. The Eibishter should borod as everlasting damage. If you lose your animals, they're gone. It's not just for a week. The Makkah was for a week, but if your animals die, then you lose that forever. But says Ibn Ezra, Shchin and Arba, no. Shchin was boils for a week. The Jews had that. So to the locusts. Because they ended up leaving Egypt. They weren't everlasting. So says the Ibn Ezra, 5 of the Makkahs hit the Jews, 5 didn't. Which 5 did? The first 3, Dam, Tzfardeya, Kinim, Shchin, and Arba.
According to him, where did people get stuff to drink? According to the Rebbe, they bought it from the Jews.
The Ibn Ezra says, the Pasuk says that the Mitzrayim dug underground for water. The Torah doesn't say if they succeeded or not. But Pashtus, they succeeded. The way the Pasuk's written is the Mitzrayim dug for water because they couldn't drink the water in the Nile. It sounds like that they succeeded in getting water from underneath. So says the Mitzrayim. That's what it says the Ibn Ezra, sorry. Look what he says in the last line. V'kasher chafru ha-Mitzrayim. The same way the Egyptians dug and they got water. The Ibn Ezra says the Makkah was only for visible water above land. Anything underground wasn't affected. So the same way the Egyptians dug and they had water, so too the Yidden. That's the opinion of the Ibn Ezra. Comes the Radvaz. The Radvaz, the great rabbi. He was decades, 40 years, the chief rabbi in Cairo in Egypt. And then he finally migrates to Eretz Yisrael. David ben Zimra. He was very much against the smicha, which was happening in Tzfas, but then ultimately he moved to Tzfas, and then once he moved there, he let it go. He never spoke about it once he came to Tzfas. There is a debate if he lived for 95 years or 110 years, because we don't know exactly when he was born. We do know that the last 20 years of his life he spent in Tzfas. So if he lived 110 years, it means he was 90 when he went to Tzfas. So I said, on your 90th birthday, I said that if the Radvaz went to Tzfas when he was 90, and then he started a whole new era of his life. At 90 is just the beginning. It's just the beginning of something new. It's a lange gute Zisayodin. So the Radvaz in number 5. So he was, by the way, the Arizal studied Nigla underneath him. The Arizal was young when his father passed away in Eretz Yisrael. His mother, the Arizal's mother, she had a brother by the name of Mordechai Francis, who was a tax collector in Egypt, and he went with his mother to live by his uncle. Then he married his uncle's daughter, and he became very close with the Radvaz. He learned Nigla under the Radvaz. The Radvaz is big stuff, and he has a letter over here. It's a well-known letter, and let's read it. Number 5. This is the end. The beginning of the letter is discussing if each Makkah really lasted a week, because Makos B'chayris was only one night. Choshech was 3 days or 6 days. So that's what he's discussing, if each of the Makos. Also, Dever, the plague, the Chayr was instantaneous. All of the animals died right away. So that's the beginning of the letter. Was each Makkah really a week, or was just some of them? By the end of the letter, he says like this: Masha Kosav, the Ibn Ezra. This that the Ibn Ezra writes, that Makas Dam and Sfardim and Kinim applied to the Egyptians and to the Jews. Asur laham in dover zeh. It's forbidden to believe such a thing. He said this, Asur lahamin. He says, Kol shekain shaksuvim merem hepech. It's also to believe it because it's against the Midrashim. The Midrashim everywhere say, by Makas Dam, the Yidden were selling the... Right? He says, and more than that, the Psukim themselves seem to clearly indicate the Jews were spared. He said, for example, it says by Dam, Lo yochlu Mitzrayim, to drink the water from the The Egyptians couldn't drink. Isn't that black and white, only the Egyptians? The Torah says the Mitzrayim dug around the Nile River. Mashma Yidden didn't have to dig. Why? Because they were drinking from the Nile. By the frogs, Moshe says, you and your nation. And when the Sfardim were going to leave, the Sfardim were going to leave, Moshe says that Sfardim will leave from you, from your house, from your servants, all you. Mashma didn't apply to the Jews. So the Ibn Ezra will say, listen, when Moshe is talking to Paroi, if Moshe knows it's going to apply to the Jews, it's the last thing he wants to tell Paroi. Because then Paroi will say, you see? Yeah, this is it's universal. Moshe had no reason to tell Paroi. That's what the Ibn Ezra, I assume, would tell back to the Radvaz. But the Radvaz says, listen, the Psukim are pretty clear. Kinim Tak is the only one which is the anomaly. And we said the Rambam says it came, didn't hurt. The Rabbeinu Yonah says we have a tradition, it never came. The Radvan says, Yilomet Sosum and Amafurish. One of the ways of dissecting scripture is if you have two similar cases and one, the details are explicit, the other it's not, you learn the ambiguous from the clear case. So we're gonna compare Kinnim. We'll extrapolate from the others to Kinnim. And then he said, "V'loya daiti." He says our question that we said before: if the Jews were taka smitten together with the Egyptians, how's it meant to teach Pari anything? Ma raya yesh b'la Pari should send the Jews out. And you know what he says?
Practical question.
Right. So then he says, "Be'emes, I'm wasting ink. Lo yehoya roy la triach hakumus b'kirtz b'zeh." I really shouldn't waste my time writing this. But I don't want to give any room to those that speak out against Chazal, namely the Ibn Ezra. So here's just another case where the Ibn Ezra freely translates the psukim as he understands it, and he receives a major flack. So the Radva says pretty sharp, Osur lahamin, it's against it, then. Yet comes the Rebbe number 6 in a Sich and Chelik Yud Aleph, and you'll never believe it. The Rebbe believes that Rashi agrees to the Ibn Ezra, that we suffered by the first few Makos. In number 6, the Rebbe says, is in Chelik Yud Aleph, Umekivan she'ein Rashi metaris. Rashi does not answer. Afilu berem is even any hint. The question, Loma lo nichta v'ifleisi begimos Makos Rishonos. If Taka, we weren't affected by any of them, why only by Orov, which is number 4, does the Torah all of a sudden say that Hashem is going to divide between the Jews and the Egyptians? If it's been happening all along, how do you explain that? So you have to find some answer that may be, whatever, I don't know, whatever the answer would be. But the fact that Rashi doesn't deal with the issue at all, Muchach must be clear. Asher b'pshuta shel mikra, in a simple reading of the verses, the Makos Rishonos affected the Jews. And the Raya is from Kinnim. The same Kinnim that Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rambam, and they're all addressing. The Kinnim affected Adam, all man, Adam Stam. Now, and the Gam, and then the Rebbe says also, don't tell me the Rambam. The Torah says Kinnim affected humanity.
Right.
It doesn't say Mitzrayim. It says humanity.
So why?
Right.
So how is that a proof to what the Rebbe is saying, that Ibn Ezra is saying that it was before?
That Yidden were affected by Kinnim.
They were always affected. If it always affected humanity, why does Kinnim bringing it up?
No. The Shiloh is the other way around. By Orov, by number 4, the Torah clearly says Hashem's going to separate. According to Ibn Ezra, it's beautiful because the first 3 they were right. So the Rebbe is using that as a proof that Rashi holds like the Ibn Ezra.
Right, but how does that help the Ibn Ezra if they were suffering the first 3?
Yeah.
So the fact that they suffered the 4 is not.
No, they didn't suffer the 4.
Oh, and says that made the difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the Rebbe says, and don't tell me that Rashi holds like the Rambam, that by Kinnim lo hoyu mitzarim oisam. Maybe Rashi will learn. You know why the Torah says the Kinnim was bechlal by humanity? Because they did come into Goshen, but they didn't harass the Jews. So the Rebbe says, in Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the simple reading of the verses, there's no source to make such a distinction. The Mitzrayim were hurt, they suffered. The Jews were visited by them, but they didn't suffer. The Rebbe says, the Rambam can say that by learning the simple reading of the Psukim, which what Rashi is trying to explain, there's no room for that. And therefore, you must say that the Yidden were equally affected by Kinnim, and so too Dam and Sfardeya. So it's fascinating, because you have the Radvaz who are throwing Ibn Ezra out the window, that it's osur to learn, and you have the Rebbe in the Sikha. By the way, in the Sikha, the Rebbe does quote the Radvaz, and nonetheless, he says the Rebbe believes that Rashi agrees.
Of course, he quotes the Radvaz, the other side. It's the other opinion.
Wait, this is all in Pshuta
Not ignoring it.
Pshuta Shemikra. The Rebbe is talking Pshuta Shemikra. Rashi, the literal meaning of the text. Okay, so this is a general issue by all the Makos. Were we affected? Were we not affected? Look in number 7. Number 7 is another comment to the Ibn Ezra. Now we're going to specifically speak about the Makkah of Dam, and we'll see some amazing things. What?
Isn't case closed? You should have brought the Sikha up to last.
The Rebbe is discussing Rashi's understanding of Pshuta Shel Mikra, the literal meaning of the verse. It's not talking about what actually happened or not. You're analyzing the text.
Commentary on the text.
Whenever somebody writes a book, right, an academic writes a book, the book now is no longer tied to the one that wrote it. And the one that wrote it could say, I meant this, that, and the other, but the book can already be studied and analyzed.
On its own.
No, this is in other words.
Change doesn't change the reality. Like what happened?
No, in other words,
Rashi's mikra.
the text, according to the
Rashi?
text is telling you the Yidden suffered. That's it. Now, you want to know what actually happened?
Yeah, that's the Yidden.
Well, no.
The Yidden suffers.
The text wants
what
you
do you
to.
think the text is not real.
No, the text is portraying that the Yidden that the correct reading of the text is to come to the conclusion that the Yidden suffered. Okay. The text wants you to come to that conclusion that they suffered. That's the correct reading of the text. The text wants you to understand that.
Why would the text want us to understand that if it didn't happen
because
that way?
maybe they were deserving to suffer.
Fine.
Maybe they should have suffered.
That's Mendy. This is all,
but that's
over,
why,
all over in the Torah. You have the regular shot. Yeah, so you have the regular shot of the thing, and then you have the...
No, but they're usually not completely contradictory.
There's an idea that...
They're not contradictory. They build on something. This is completely contradictory.
It's not. It's a
the Mefarshim could argue, like, you have the Ibn Ezra could tell you that the Pasuk is trying to convey this and this message. Finished. Chazal say something else happened. Okay. It could be that's right. It could be Chazal are right. But the text is telling me this is what happened. Finished. Now, why would the text tell me something different than the reality? That's a philosophical question. And that could be every case is different. But the Ibn Ezra will tell you, when the Ibn Ezra says things against Chazal, right? He's not trying to argue with the Midrashim and the Gemaras, although people thought that he did. Rather, what he was doing is, if you a little bit out of the box, he's telling you this is how the text is supposed to be understood.
I think it's very clear.
The text is supposed to be understood that the Yidden suffered by Makas Dam.
Now you're going to
you want to know what actually happened? Well, maybe the Medrash will tell you what actually happened.
No, but it's very...
Okay.
Somehow they did something.
But it
could be. That's
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Just
No,
like
but
Moshe Rabbeinu last week, you said he's buried in Har.
Right, yeah.
But he's in Mardus. So which one is it? It's a Metzias. Either he's there or
Right,
he's
we
there.
saw that
Yeah, but there we
were able to find it.
they built and they
You
took
know
his
how they
body.
both be
They
right.
moved
Yeah,
it.
you moved
Right,
it.
right.
It's
It's
like
not contradictory.
It's like a final thing.
Fine,
But
I
here-
hear. Okay.
But here, as you
Let's
said,
go.
look, the Yidden were living like Egyptians, so they had to suffer like Egyptians till the time that they started realizing
that's okay.
that so this is why at the first
You're giving a rationale why they would have had to suffer.
Good reason.
Okay, yeah. The Yidden had fallen into 49 gates of impurity. They weren't doing bris.
They had to have everything like the Egyptians until the realization that yes, if you follow the Eibishter,
Right, that would be a rationale for why the Eibishter would have done what the Ibn Ezra claims Hashem did. The question we're discussing is that
no, that's what we're discussing exactly.
That's
once you establish
why.
what happened, you want to go to the why. We're still struggling with the what.
No,
What exactly happened?
Oh,
you're here. Okay, let's go to number 7. Hold on.
The Rebbe settled it.
Hello,
That's
the
it.
Ibn
It's
Ezra.
done.
That's only in Rashi Pshuta Shel Mikra. And by the way, I don't know. Listen, take a 5-year-old kid learning Chumash and Rashi. Ask him, you learn Va'era? What do you think? Were the Jews suffered by the Makos? I don't know if the kid gets the impression.
But he's 5. But he's 5.
So,
Whatever
but that's
kid
what the Rashi's
5
writing
year old
for.
doesn't understand suffering.
By the way, the Rebbe in later Sichos keep referring back to this Sicha. The Rebbe never budged from this. Even years later, the Rebbe was very comfortable with saying,
Wow.
yeah.
What will be the point is that when it escalated. So it
Yeah.
started, and then after the
Right,
four, it
right,
was done.
exactly, yeah.
So it wasn't.
But then, but according to Ibn Ezra, came back. Shchin they got again. Arba they got anything which didn't have long-lasting damage.
Besides, the Yidden had to sell the water, otherwise they wouldn't have had
Now Choshech, the Torah clearly said. But you know what? By Choshech, like the Torah points out, the Yidden had so much light, right? You know, and so the Ibn Ezra would say, you know, if they weren't affected by Shchin and Arba, and the Torah doesn't say anything, why would it make a statement by Choshech that the Yidden had lots of light? Like, doesn't that show you that only the fact that the Torah only says it by certain ones? Isn't that a clear indicator for the argument to the Ibn Ezra? Yeah. So others say no, but others give reasons why. For example, by Choshech, people say the Torah is not saying the Jews were unaffected. The Torah is saying the Jews had light for six days straight, for 6 times 24 hours straight. There was no nighttime. The Torah is saying not the Yidden weren't affected. They were never affected by any of them. But it was it was a polar opposite. The Egyptians had 6 days of darkness. The Jews had 6 24-hour periods straight of...
Like don't tell us.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, you have slept during the day. Come to any of my shiurim. There's no problem. Have no problem sleeping during the day. Anyhow, look at number 7. Number 7 is the Ibn Ezra's back. Okay, if we haven't seen enough, the Ibn Ezra says like this: Lisho. Some people ask, Im al yad Aaron, if through when Aaron touched the water, nefchul kol meimim, all the water turned into blood. So the Egyptian magicians also found water. Where'd they find water? So at Tshuva, he says, and we mentioned this before, Aaron loy hafach rak hamayim shoya al haaretz. Aaron only transformed the water above the earth, not the water that was under the earth. The Khartoumim chafru, the Khartoumim had to dig, just like anyone that wanted to drink had to dig, whether Jew, whether Gentile, and also the sorcerers. They dug, they took out water, and then they showed that it turned into blood. And then he says, by the way, you think Aaron did the same thing as the magicians? Yesh hefresh gadol, huge difference between the act of Aaron and their acts. Because Aaron transformed the entire river that was in front of him. V'chol mayim, all the water that was in the entire Egypt that was not even in front of him. In other words, Aaron's in one place. You're talking about miles and miles away, water turned to blood. And here's another important thing that the Rebbe discusses in a sikha. The Nile is a river, right? The river's constantly flowing. Ki hafach mayim she'enam oimdim rak rotzim tomid. The water wasn't a lake, it was a river. Umayim acherim bon, there's always new water coming. And all that water was continuously turning into blood for 7 days. So the shayla is because the Nile is a river, right? So there's a spring. So according to the Ibn Ezra, a spring wasn't transformed. But for 7 days straight, all the water that kept on coming, as soon as it would leave from the underground to be considered above surface level,
Change.
to blood. Again, even without Aaron doing anything.
Water out of Egypt when it left.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Hold on to that point. In addition, Aaron did his makkah for 7 days. And he says the Egyptians did it for 1 second. And he says the Egyptians had a little bit of water in a cup, and they did some it turned red, Pari turned around, and then it turned white again. He says you can't compare where Aaron did a true miracle. They did some little hocus pocus. So that's the Ibn Ezra. Okay. The Chizkuni in number 8. The Chizkuni was just after the Ibn Ezra in the 1200s in France, and he has a whopping opinion of what happened by Makos Dam. All the water in the river turned to blood. Says the Chizkuni, let me tell you what happened. You think the water turned red for 7 days? It's b'chlal not what happened. Loi nasa ha'ya'er dam except lefisha. The water turned to blood for a moment. All the fish then died. Miyad mesa hadoga, the fish died because of the blood. As soon as all the fish were dead, achar kachaza ha'ya'er the kadmusa, the river is now white again. And that's where the sources were able to find water. The Nile itself was regular water. But all the fish had poisoned it. Umasha Kosov, when the Pasuk says the Mitzrayim couldn't drink from the water, it's not because it was blood. And the proof is we don't find the Mitzrayim begging Moshe or Pari begging Moshe, stop the Makkah. Right? By Tzfardim, by the others, Pari is begging stop. Over here, not. Says the Chizkuni, there was nothing to stop. The water turned to blood for a moment. All the fish died. And then it reverted back to regular H2O, regular water. So but it was contaminated by the fish.
Was to kill the fish.
Yeah.
And then the
Why
fish.
not make a makkah to kill
He says exactly because the fish that was in the water died and the water became polluted. And the proof is that the Egyptian sorcerers followed suit. He says if the Nile was still red, how could they do that? Right.
Well, why would they get polluted water? It's poison.
Why did they?
No.
To do their magic trick. Where did they get the water to do the magic trick? He says the Nile was full of regular water. Polluted, but it was water. It looked like water. It was contaminated by the dead fish. And that's why no one asked Moshe, stop the makkah. There was nothing to stop. It would just take natural time for the, it's a flow until the water becomes healthy again. That took 7 days. It took 7 days till the water was drinkable. The old fish, I guess, were swept away with the old water. It took 7 days. V'yesh mefarshim, some say, Hamakah shimsha revi'ah chodesh, 1 week for the makkah, b'mayim hanirim lebrius, only above ground. He's quoting the Ibn Ezra. And the Khartoumim used the water underneath the ground. And the proof that the water underneath the ground was still okay is the Ibn Ezra's proof, that it says that the Mitzrayim dug and it's mashma they succeeded. Ki oisan mayim, that water was not transformed, only the water in the rivers above ground. So he quotes the Ibn Ezra at the end. By the Chizkuni writes,
Chizkuni's saying, and then the fish, this whole idea of Lefisha.
he's saying that there are those who learn.
That's
The first shot is his idea. Then he quotes the Ibn Ezra.
It was blood the whole time.
Right. Yeah, for a week it was blood, but underneath the ground was okay. But so the issues with the second shot that he's quoting the Ibn Ezra, that's fine. The first shot that he brings of his own, some of you mentioned, that means the makkah was really about the fish. It wasn't the Nile that was really struck; it was the fish. And the whole purpose of the makkah, we have so many reasons in Chazal, Rashi, and Medrash of why was the first makkah done? The Eibishter wants to strike the god that they would worship, which was the Nile.
Right.
Or because they threw the Yiddish babies in the Nile.
Moshe couldn't do it because he was saved.
Right. And the Medrash, the Medrash Ramba says the Mitzrayim wouldn't allow the women to go to mikveh. The Yiddish women wanted to go to mikveh. The Egyptians wouldn't allow, so the Eibishter struck the water. We have so many reasons why he struck the water. According to the Chizkuni, Bechlal, it was really the fish. Through that, the water was contaminated.
Bechlal, fish are like holy objects. Like
anyhow.
Makos dam, not Makos dugim.
You don't say dugim right there.
Exactly.
Right. According to the Chizkuni, the dam was just a trigger for the fish to die, and really the contamination was the fish.
Yeah.
A bunch of dead fish.
And also, even if you want to say the fish spoiled the water, it's not blood. It's the spoiled water not.
The fish died because thanks to blood.
Lack of sewage.
Right. It's by the Chizkuni is not the only one. There's one of the Rishonim, the Bechor Shur. The Bechor Shur, one of the early Rishonim, the Ashkenazi Rishonim, learned like this as well. So the Chizkuni is not the only one who gives this. It answers a number of shaylas. It answers how come no one told Moshe stop the makkah. Why by Tzfardeya Pari begs to stop and not by Dam? According to Chizkuni, there's nothing to stop. It turned to blood for a moment. The fish died. Now it's back to water.
No idea that Moshe was able to stop it anymore. By Tzfardeya, they already knew.
How do you know that he could stop it? Oh, because the dam finished by itself after a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
By Tzfardeya, they already knew.
All right, hold on. Okay. So now let's go. Here's the issue. The kasha that I'm going to ask you over here. We're going to build up a kasha and give two answers. Very interesting. The second answer is a Rebbe's revolution about what happened by the Makkah of Dam. But what's the question? The question is that the fact is, according to the Medrash Rabbah, the Jews were unaffected by any of the Makkahs, including Dam. And if Egyptian and a Jew drank from the same cup of water, for the Jew was water, for the Egyptian was blood. The Egyptian had to buy the Jew's water in order to have water. If you notice in the Ibn Ezra, we saw in number 4, he says, Rabbim Omer, many believe, the water turned to blood in the hands of the Mitzri. When the Yid would get hold of it, it would revert back to natural water. It's mashma that water turned to blood. When a Yid would get hold of it, a second miracle would happen. And the blood would turn back to water. Now, the Medrash Rabbah says the Yidden sold tons of water, gallons and gallons of water. And the Medrash says at that point they became exceedingly wealthy. So here's the problem. Look at number 9. We have a few stories from Masechta Taanis. Let's do this quick. Number 9. Rav Huna had a barrel of wine in a beis or re'iyah, in a shaky home. There was a home that was about to topple. In the home, there was a choshev, a barrel of wine. It belonged to Rav Huna. Rav Huna was afraid to go in. Boy lifnu, he wanted to take out the barrel, but he was afraid to go in by himself. Aile, he brings in Rav Ada bar Ava lahasam. He brings Rav Ada bar Ava, who was a big tzaddik, and Rav Huna knew that the Eibush is not going to make that house fall on my good friend over here. How did he bring him into this broken home? Mashche b'shmaita, he drew him in discussion. Ad the pan, he was talking and casually he recovered his wine. Basar de Nofak, as soon as they left, Nofal base of the house fell down. So Argish Rav Ada bar Ava felt you used me. Ikbid, he was upset because he holds like Rabbi Yana. Rabbi Yana says, never put yourself in a place of danger and say, well, a miracle will happen. You're going to stand in the road and say, a miracle is going to happen. No. Because maybe a miracle won't. And even if it does, it comes at a price, it comes at a cost. You lose your merits. You know, it comes at a cost. And Rav Chanon says, what's the proof? Yaakov tells the Eibishter that you've been so good to me over time, I'm worried that I've already spent all of my mitzvahs and therefore
nothing left.
I don't deserve anything anymore. What do you see from this Gemara? That if somebody wants to benefit from a miracle, it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. Okay? Let's develop this further. Number 10. This is a story with Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, great Tana, a miracle man. Chad Bei Shimshi, one Friday afternoon, it was after sunset. Chazi, he sees Lebrata, his daughter. The Havas Atziva, she was sad. Amar, so he says, Biti, my tochter, Lamai Atzivas, what are you sad about? That's how you have to go into Shabbos. You have to ask your family members how everybody's doing. Rebbe Melech of Lijensk, Friday afternoon, right before Shabbos, he used to go around to everyone in his house and ask them forgiveness in case he said something throughout the week. Yeah. You see from here, you go, Friday, said lots to do Friday right before Ma'ariv. He sees his daughter needs attention, exactly. So she tells him what happened. What happened?
Yelling and rushing and
exactly.
saying, let's go, I'm late, run to shul, and you come on, where's your shoes?
And it was right before lift bench.
Amazing.
After lift bench.
Amazing.
Right, after. Amazing. So she tells him what happened. She bench licht. Exactly.
Yeah, running the
pinnacle of stress.
Gotta shut the lights, make sure.
Kli shel chaymitz nischalefli b'kli shel shemen. She said, I lit a candle, but the fuel is not oil, it's vinegar. Now today you have all those fuels that look mamish the same color as vinegar. So v'idlakti mimenu, I lit a candle, and it's going to go out and finished. So she was sad. So he said, Biti. No, he already accepted Shabbos. So he said, my daughter, what does it bother you? The same God, Misha Amar Lashem and V'yidlag, the one who said that oil should light, he'll now say that vinegar could light. And you know what happened? It was doilik v'hoilik the entire Shabbos, the headlight. Ad until sheheviu mimenu, they brought from it Ur Lahavdalah. Rashi there explains, when Shabbos ended, Chanina ben Doisa wants to make Havdalah. He needs eish, he needs a candle. He didn't want to use this candle. It was a magical candle. So what he did was, Heviu mimenu, he lit a second fire from the magical candle, put out the magical candle, and he made Havdalah in the second thing. And Rashi says, why did he do that? So Rashi says, look, remember number 9? You don't want to benefit from miracles. If you benefit from miracles, it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. But this is a new thing. There's an idea not to benefit from miracles.
Period.
It comes at a cost. We'll give explanations soon why. Okay, let's develop it further. Next page. Let's go.
This had nothing to do with the halachic issue of a miracle. You can't do a fire like we did by the menorah.
That was if halacha pertains to magical products. Right. Here, the two discussions meet at certain intervals, but here we're discussing the etzem idea that the idea is like this. Sometimes
the whole Ner Shabbos, how was it? Was a Ner of a miracle.
But he had no choice. On Shabbos, there was no choice.
Yeah.
Right. Well, she
made the bracha.
She made the bracha on natural. She made on natural fire.
Yeah, and the fire prior.
Exactly.
Right. On the vinegar fire.
The vinegar fire.
Right. So the idea is. Now, sometimes a person's struggling. The Eibishter can offer you a supernatural way out, but the Eibishter is offering. He says, if you want, you can indulge and take advantage, but it's going to come at a big cost. It's almost like a test a person has. And you're going to see the Gemara is going to continuously say it's better off to avoid it. You have an opportunity. You could take it if you want. But in the greater scheme of things, it's greater to avoid it. Let's see this for. Look at number 11. You got to see more. Number 11 is another story. Elazar ish Birta, the man of Birta. This guy was not a wealthy guy, but he gave every penny to tzedakah. And whenever the tzedakah collectors were in sight, they would run away from him. They were afraid that he... There was a Chassidic Rebbe. The shame, well, his wife has a part of the story. The Avnei Nezer had a son, the Shem Mishmul, Shmuel of Sachachav. When he was a young man, he was being pestered the whole day. People were nudging him. And he said, Tata, well, give me some advice. So the Avnei Nezer told him, if the fellows are wealthy, ask them for a loan. If they're poor, give them a loan. Either way, you'll never see them again.
Absolutely true.
They say about the Baal Shem Tov, he didn't leave money also. Any money he had, he gave away for the end.
Yeah. It could be about the Baal Shem Tov. I've seen it about Meir Prem Mishlana. And
same idea.
Right, not to. There's an idea not to go to sleep with the extra pen in your home. I do that every night. Don't go to sleep with extra pen in the house. Anyhow, look at number. So number 11, the story is like this. Elazar ish birta kad have a chazule gaboy stock. When the gaboyim would see him, have a tosh, they ran away from him because they knew that he would give them everything he had. B'chol ma'ida have a gabe, whatever he had, he would give them. So Yom Echad, one day, he went to the marketplace to buy. He was marrying off his daughter soon. He went to buy some stuff for the wedding. The gaboy stock see him, they run away from him. He notices them. Ozal, he went v'rohat, he ran basaya after them. We're in the fourth line now. And he caught up to them. He says, I demand to know, b'maya skisa, what are you busy with? They said, there's an orphan boy and girl to get married. He said, I swear by God, they come before my daughter. He took everything that he had and he gave to them. Poshle chadzuz, he had one coin left. He bought some wheat. He came home, v'asiki shadya ba'achlov, he threw it into the storehouse. His wife comes home. His wife asks the daughter, the Kala maid, no, what'd your father bring back from the market? So the girl says, listen, I don't know, whatever Tata brought back, he threw into the Kol ma da'aisi, whatever he brought back, Shadis, he threw it in the storehouse. So the wife went to see. She Asya miftach bov, she wanted to open the door, the achlov of the storehouse. Chazes achlova demal yechit, it's full of wheat. The konafka bitzinura dadasha, wheat was protruding through the hinges of the door. She couldn't open the door. V'lo miftach bov, she couldn't open the gate. So much wheat. So the daughter ran to the base medrash, and her father was learning. She said, Tata, look what God has done for you. He says, I swear, I swear by God, they're hektish alecha. This is a. I don't want you to have benefit from it. This belongs to the poor people of town. Now you happen to be a poor girl, you can join the poor. It doesn't belong to our family. I do not, and Rashi explains, I do not want to have benefits.
But is that because of benefit
from miraculous it was a miracle.
But also
not because he wanted to give away more.
Right, no, exactly. It was because it was a miracle.
Or because he felt he wasn't entitled. The whole point, he's saying those kids come before my kids. I don't want...
But he already gave all this money to them.
Okay, so now I want to give all the rest. Now I have more, I give more.
No, he says, the simple explanation they say is because he did not want to have benefits from miraculous products. Now we're not going to destroy it. Let the poor have. He tells his daughter, you happen to be a poor, you also take a bit.
So don't you think it creates a conflict because everybody is telling everybody when you go to the oil, or when you ask, you can ask for money for yourself and this and this and this. I always thought it's a little bit, you should be limiting it and you should ask only the one thing that's absolutely necessary.
The Rebbe...
Listen, in Shemaina Ezra, the Chazal formulated the brachos that we ask for everything that we need, not just one.
Right.
God wants you to reach out for everything. The Eibishter has big storehouses, Don't limit it. By asking for one thing, it's almost like you're limiting God. Say, Eibishter, I know you don't have too many resources, but one thing. No. Show your trust in God by asking Him for everything. In number 12, what?
The Maggid was like a single tear. They didn't have any food in the house. He cried one single tear and he told his wife to look in her pocket and there was coins there.
Don't know the story. Interesting. Number 12 is one more story in Gemara. Rav Mori Bra de Bas Shmuel. What?
You haven't convinced us yet? You need one more?
Shmuel, the Amor Shmuel Nebuch had a daughter that was raped by a goy.
Robin Shmuel?
Yeah. That Shmuel had a daughter raped by a goy, and she conceived.
Who's the claim?
The goy.
No, Shmuel. It says that when Shmuel used to come to Rav's shul, Rav still used to take the aliyah before the kohen because he was a Talmid Chacham.
Basra the Rav. Okay, Shmuel's daughter ended up giving birth to this Rav Mori. So Rav Mori is called Rav Mori, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, has no father. Punkt, that guy ended up converting. He became known as Isser the Ger. Isser the Ger. Anyhow, he says, I was standing on the edge of a river called the River of Papa when there was a horrible hunger. And I saw a miracle happen. I saw a group of angels that looked like Malchi, sailors. They were filling up a ship with sand. And when they took that ship to the port, to the area where there was a famine, all of that sand turned into flour. The whole world came to buy. Rav Yehuda said, don't buy. That's miraculous stuff. Don't go there.
That's pretty
So Lamacher, the next day, you know what happened? Asyan Arbi Dechiti de Parzina. There's a place called Parzina. Another ship came through natural means, full of flour, and the hunger was all over. Look at number 14, by the way. Rabbi Yankiv Emden asked on that story, so if Rav Yehuda wasn't going to allow them to eat it, why did the Eibishter allow the Malach? Why did this whole miracle happen? Why did the Malachim bring? To excite them. If someone has food in front of him, doesn't feel hungry. In other words, the fact that they knew that there's something nearby already quenched their hunger. That was the purpose of it, but not that that actually benefits. So here's the issue. The issue is, really, there are so many times where we see people enjoying miraculous events that the Eibusha brought upon them.
Man.
When the Jews were in the desert, the Man, the well of Miriam, did it occur upon anybody that maybe I shouldn't drink the well of Miriam? I should dig in the ground and find some water deep in the desert? Or I should leave the Amnonei Akovid and travel because they were nomads, there were groups of people in the desert, let me go buy some food from them? Nobody did that. In Tanakh, you have stories. Elisha, with the wife of Ovadia, that Ovadia was a Navi, and Ovadia had kept 100 Nevi'im as Jezebel, the queen Jezebel, the Izebel, the wife of Achav, wanted to knock off the Jewish prophets. Ovadia hid 100 Nevi'im, 50 in one cave, 50 in another, and he was supporting them, very expensive, right? And he actually borrowed money from Achav's son, Yehoram. Ovadia dies, and Yehoram tells Ovadia's wife, I'm taking your kids as payment. She runs to Elisha, so you got to help me. He says, what do you have in your house? I have a little jug of oil. So she says, exactly, get kalim from Vayera. Yeah. And she gets a huge amount of oil, all miraculous oil. And then Elisha says, sell it. Elio, by the woman by the Tsarfis, Elio went to a place called Tsarfis, not France, somewhere closer to Eretz Yisrael. And he tells this woman, he says, I want to eat by you tonight. She says, Rabbi, I have nothing in the house. I have a drop of flour, a drop of oil. He says, good, good. Make a little thing of bread. First give me, and the leftovers you'll have for you and your kids. And then Elio said, because God has spoken, that flask of oil that you have will never end. We'll just keep on pouring. And the jug of flour you have will never cease until the famine's over. So you see stories upon stories. So,
well, it seems like you use the nest, like the lamp by.
That was on Shabbos because there was nothing else. There was no choice. There was no choice. There was no choice.
The balance.
Number 12, there was a hunger going on. There's finally flour. Rav Yehuda says, no, you can't do it. It's miraculous. No one knew that the next day another ship was going to come. Rav Yehuda kept them in the dark. That's like, what does he want from them? It's pretty serious.
He found the loophole that his daughter should get what she needed. Like you're from the
Right. The reason this relates to what we're learning is because the way the Ibn Ezra quotes Rabbim, all the commentators, is that everything turned to blood. When a Yid would get hold of it, it would revert back to water. Mm-hmm. That means the Yid is possessing a miraculous item that went through two miracles: water to blood, blood back to water. If he would sell it to the Mitzrayim, he's getting benefit from miraculous product. So there's a comment here from Rabbi Yankiv Emden and from the Chidah. Look at number 13. Number 13 is Yankiv Emden. Yankiv Emden believes as long as the beginning of the item was natural, then I don't care whatever grows from it. You're allowed to have benefit from all of that. We discussed the Kli Chemdor of Meir Don Plotsky, one of the big Achronim. He says that when it comes to miraculous products in halacha, he says the same distinction. If you have an item that the original cell, the original part of the item, was natural, then however it grows, I don't care if it grows miraculously, halacha will pertain to it. It's only if the item is completely magical, like creating an item with Sefer Yetzirah. What?
That would apply.
Right, exactly. Because the Taz says a little bit of oil had to remain over from the first night. Right. The Yankiv Emden wants to use the same.
13.
In number 13, uses the same idea for our discussion. Do you know when there's an issue to benefit from a miraculous item? If the item is miraculous from beginning to end. But if the original dose of the item was natural and it just expanded miraculously, then the same way we saw Lagabe halacha that it would be subject to halacha, so too it would be fine to have benefit. Let's see what he says in number 13. After it could be there was a bit of a case talking about another story, doesn't matter. He says if you have a bit of flour in the jug, just like what happened by the Tzarfis with Eliyahu, and so too Eishes Ovadia, the wife of Ovadia, by Elisha. By both of them, the miracle was not ex nihilo yesh ma'ayin. It wasn't. It was expanding something that was there.
So is this a formulaic admonishment? Like, don't go next to it because there's something
if it's
formulaically wrong but miraculous, that's why
no,
it
because
can be
it
analogous.
costs you because it comes at a major cost.
So then, what's the difference if it started at this? You're getting a benefit you didn't deserve. You got a benefit from a what's it called?
Hold on. But no, because
maybe you deserve.
Wait.
A benefit from a miracle. What's the difference if it started a miracle? Half miracle.
Because you asked the Eibishter for parnasa, right? And the Eibishter sends you huge parnasa in a natural form, huge parnasa. That you're allowed to do and you're encouraged to do. It comes at a cost. You might lose things in the future. No. When
it didn't seem like it was about miracles.
It was
about weights and scales and measures that I use up.
Okay,
that's
fine. But the Gemara derives. But you know what? Then you could say like. Then someone could say, why should I ask the Eibishter for bracha in this world? Let me keep all my brachas for the world to come. Why should I? So why should I ask God for health? Why should I ask for parnasa? The Gemara only extrapolates from Yaakov, we saw number 9, for miraculous. So just like for parnasa, there's no problem. Ask and ask.
So there's no such thing as katainti only if it's from miraculous.
As far as our discussion for tonight, and that's the basic application of the idea of Yankiv is miraculous events, like all the examples that we saw. They're all miraculous. So says Rabbi Yankiv Emden in the 4th line, V'kahai gavna, once the original item was natural, it's mutter to have benefits, like by Eliyahu, and like by the Tzarfis woman and her son, and by the wife of Avadia with Elisha. And so too by the vinegar. He disagrees with Rashi. He says the case of Chanina ben Doisa with his daughter, the candle was lit. It had a wick. Okay, it was soaked in vinegar, but the original light was natural. The extension of the light was miraculous. Says Yankiv Emden, that's fine. And they could use it for Havdalah Mitzvah Shabbos. Wow. He disagrees with Rashi. What?
And why didn't they?
They did. He's going to say he reads it differently. He says, so too by the vinegar that we besamach that said soon, they were mutter to have benefits. And it's like when Elisha healed the waters of Yericho, and the waters of Yericho were very bitter. Elisha healed them, and then he had benefit from a miracle. Now, what's the connection to the river that Elisha, the river of Yericho? Who said any of it was still good?
Use the light because other people weren't.
And then he says you can't compare this to the story that we saw in number 12 of when the Malachim transformed sand into flour, because that's mamish completely in the hands of heaven. And then he says this, that Rashi says that they didn't, that Rabbi Chanina ben Noitza wouldn't use the vinegar candle for Avdallah. He says, I disagree. What the Gemara means when it says that they used from it means the neighbors. It means neighbors, some reason nobody had candles at Mitzvah Shabbos, so everybody ended up using his original candle. But the neighbors would come with their candle, light it from his, so the neighbors punkt use the stage too, just out of practicality. But he used the original miraculous candle. Why? Because since originally it was a regular wick that was burning with vinegar, it was the extension that was miraculous. So this is Yankov Emden's take on the matter.
Couldn't you also say
now,
that
it's not going to... what?
Couldn't you have a bit of a reach, but say that the miracle of the candle was not a personal one to that family, it was for Shabbos. That the miracle was about Shabbat, not because of the family.
Okay, interesting. All right. Point taken. I just want to finish up very quickly. So according to Yankov Emden, you could say the water in Egypt was originally water, right? Then it was turned to blood. A Yid gets hold of it, it reverts back to water. Because it originally was water, it only went through a few miraculous steps along the way. But its original status, this was water once before, I would say Yankov Emden would say it's not a problem. That's one option. In number 15, the Chidah has a different take on it. The Chidah says in number 15, Makshim, everybody asks, why didn't Chanina ben Doisa say about the candle, may God transform the vinegar into oil? So he says, no. A miracle has to be in the smallest way possible. To transform the vinegar into oil, that's like it's a too...
alchemy.
It's an unconcealed miracle. It's too noticeable, right? Too ostentatious. And the miracle will be too publicized. But the fact that it just continued to burn, whatever.
There's room for somebody to say, there was a lot of oil in there.
Right. Or he says, you ever heard of the sefer Gal Shel Goyim, the pile of nuts? It's an old sefer. The Gal Shel Goyim says like this: even though it's also to benefit from miraculous items, but he says, oil and vinegar, they both exist. For vinegar to have the characteristics of oil is not such a miracle. There's oil, there's vinegar. You want vinegar to have the characteristics of oil. But to create something ex nihilo, like I don't know the difference exactly of turning the sand into dust or sand into flour or not.
Because you're changing the etzem of it. You're not changing here by the vinegar. And
Anyhow,
you're not changing
I'll
let
you finish the Chidah number 15 on your own. Hold on. I was going to finish up over here. Number 16 and number 17 is the Chidah in his Sefer Midbar Kedemus. In his Sefer Midbar Kedemus. Look at number 17. The Chidah asks about the Mon in number 17. The Mon was Maisa miracle. In fact, Mon stands for Maisa Nisim. The Afal Gav that we say Bepirka D'Chsidi, the parak that speaks about Chassidic practice, which is that parak of kindness, you shouldn't have benefit from miraculous items. He says you can't compare. He says if the Eibishter gives it directly for you to enjoy, it's a chutzpah to turn your back and say, you know what? I think I want. It's like they make a joke in the future by the Leviosan. In the future, the Eibishter will serve fish. he's also going to serve the Shar Haber, the wild ox. And the Medrash says the Eibishter will use the fins of the Levyasan to shech the Shar Haber. So everybody asks, if the Eibishter is serving such good meat, who's going to take fish? Because you have the guy, he's going to ask God, you're serving flesh, who took care of the shchita? And Hashem will say, I took the fins of the fish. And the guy's going to say, yeah, I'm not sure about that shchita. I'll take the fish. What the Chidah is saying is like this. When does the Gemara say you should avoid miraculous items is when someone's in trouble and the Eibishter says, listen, I'm giving you a porthole to a magical solution. You could take it if you want, but it comes at a big cost. And that's when Chazal say it's not worth it, avoid it. But if the Eibishter is telling you, I want you to benefit from this, if you avoid Pashut HaChutzpah, he says that the Pasuk says, Mon is the bread Hashem gave you to eat. If Hashem gave it to you, it's mutter and it's a mitzvah to benefit. And so to in number 16. In number 16, he says, the end of the first line, the wife of Avadia asked Elisha, should I sell the oil? What was she asking? She wasn't comfortable to make money from the miraculous oil. So he quotes one answer, which says like this, Efshir could be, since oil became very expensive, she was allowed to sell. And that's what Elisha said, you're allowed to sell because oil became very expensive, and therefore those that are buying it from you, they're desperate. So the Chidah says in the fourth line, I don't understand this, what that means at all. Are you asking on the buyers or on the woman selling? If you're asking on the buyers, then even if it didn't get expensive, if they're just paying regular price, they're not benefiting from a magical item. That's the price of oil that they're paying. They would have paid in Publix nearby as well. You're asking on her and on her kids? So then what's the answer? It got expensive? Then fakir, she's making more profit. The Chidah doesn't understand what's this. The oil became expensive. How does it answer anything? But he says, you know what I think? Nidden zeh shno, you can't compare. Because the Eibishter made this miracle clearly that she should pay off Yehoram and that she and her kids should live with the addition. The miracle was done not as a test that Hashem says, if you want, take it, but it comes at a cost. No, the Eibishter is telling you, enjoy. And over here, it's okay. So the Chidah's take on the matter in his Sefer Midbar Kedemus is, you have to ascertain in each case, is the Eibishter offering to you an olive branch and you have to, maybe take it, maybe better to avoid? Or is God saying, I'm giving you a hand, I want you to take it? Then it's a chutzpah to avoid it.
Maybe because it was to pay off that loan, making it expensive is better because then fewer people are making use of the miracle.
How do you know how many people are buying?
It doesn't matter if the price is double, then half as many people are.
No, she's still selling the same amount of oil. She has X amount of gallons of oil. She's still selling the amount of oil.
Even after
how do you know how many buyers? Okay, you would think they're more expensive, the more people want. It's just a commodity to buy. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me finish off like this. So there is a Rav in Eretz Yisrael, but Asher Weiss, I've quoted him many times. He believes that if you take the Chidah's path, it answers our shaila about how the Yidden sold the water for money. He says like this: if the Mitzrayim cannot get access to water, the only way is if they buy it from the Jew. Isn't that the Eibishter clearly saying with his finger, Jews, I want you to sell the water to the Mitzrayim, I want you to get the money? So that's how he wants to answer. This is a case where the Eibishter is pointing with his finger and says, I want you to enjoy it. And I don't know, to me it's not so clear. The water the Yidden got in contact with remained water, and even the blood would become water in their hands. The Eibishter wants the Mitzrayim to survive, but he doesn't want them to get a freebie. So the only way is if they buy it. But
for the Jews, it's
right. No.
It's miraculous.
Right. In other words, the Rebbe Asher Weiss wants to say for the Jew, it's as if Hashem is clearly saying, I want you to make money through selling it to the Mitzrayim.
Why can't he just say that miracle?
I don't know.
The world didn't go upside down. For them, it stayed.
Now, the Mitzrayim do need water to live.
The Jews
That's
stayed
true.
In a bottle of water.
Right.
So in your hands, it looked like there was no miracle even. For him, it was. Why can't you say
No,
it that
because
way?
because even if the Yid would have gotten blood, the Ibn Ezra says, according to many, the water the Jew has in his hand was blood a few minutes before. It became water in the Jew's hand,
Right.
and now he sells it to the Mitzri
It became blood because it was in the Mitzri's hand. They gave it to
because it's in Mitzrayim. And then when he got it, it would become water again.
The
And when
Jew
he's
got
selling it, his
stayed water.
who knows? Why can't you still apply the idea? The Abish is giving you a test. If you want to make lots of money, make money. But maybe you could still say that maybe better to avoid. So I want to say the following: the Rebbe.
Wouldn't it be considered part of Vinitzat Mitzvah, right?
Okay. Okay. The
They
Shaila is.
should have told them, you're going to empty out Egypt. And this
But
is
who
what
said
you're
that?
gonna do.
But
Not yet.
maybe in a natural fashion. Maybe in a natural fashion. Who said it should be through? But here's the thing. This is the clincher. Is like this. The Rebbe learns in a few places. You know what happened by the Makkah of Dam? The Rebbe learns. You think the water was transformed into blood? That's not what happened. The water, in essence, remained water. It looked like blood. It smelled like blood. It tasted like blood. It was in essence water. Look what the Rebbe says in number 18. The Nes is nit meshana tevadov. This miracle didn't change the essence, like the miracle by Dam, when the water was changed to blood. Zayin ze farblibed in the mechus. It was still water, and the Rebbe learns the Eibishter was doing a magic trick for 7 days straight. For 7 days straight, the Eibishter made it. It wasn't a one-time thing. It became blood, and then 7 days later, back water. No. The entire 7 days, the Eibishter was doing a magic trick, constantly making water appear as blood. You know what happened after the 7 days? The Eibishter stopped the magic trick.
It was an optical illusion.
And the Rebbe says when the miracle stopped, the Eibishter stopped the magic trick. Memele automatically. The change left. It was back water like it always really was. That's what the Rebbe writes in Tovshin Nun Aleph. In 19 is a Sicha in Chelik Lamed Aleph, where the Rebbe says a similar thing. Le'idach, the Rebbe says in number 19, Loi Motzina, we don't find that after the end of Makas Dam, Hashem had to make the blood back into water.
Right.
He didn't. But Pashtus, the Ya'ur returned to its original thing, but Derech Memela. The Rebbe there is discussing automatically. The Rebbe is discussing where do you see by Makkah's Dam that the Makkah lasted for 7 days. The Chor Hashem went azoy, the water went red. 7 days later, when azoy went back to water. No, the Rebbe says the whole time it was water. For 7 days, the Eibishter was making this miracle that it looked like blood. After 7 days, he stops the magic trick, back to water, which means even if the Yid got hold of. A Yid has water, a Yid went to the Nile, right? The Nile's red, and the Yid takes tons of water, right? And now it's beautiful water. Our question was, l'chora, that liquid he had has gone through two miracles. It became blood and became back water. So when he sells it to the Mitzri, he's benefiting from a miracle. According to Rebbe, that's not what happened. When the Yid went to the Nile, there's water in the Nile. The Eibush is doing an illusion that makes it appear like blood. When the Yid would take it, you know what Hashem would do? He would stop the illusion. What did the Yid had? He had natural water. Yeah. He had natural water. So when the Yid was selling it to the Mitzri, he was selling natural water. According to the Rebbe, he was selling natural water. So the whole question doesn't... Anyhow, so we have the answer of Yankov Emden that we saw, that as long as the original item was natural, I don't care what happens later, you can have benefits. We have the answer based on the...
live wire. You can touch it.
Right.
When there's nothing going on, it's a piece of metal.
We had the answer of the Chidah that if you can somehow say that the Eibishter clearly wants you to benefit, then all bets are off. And then we say, according to the Rebbe, it's beautiful the way the Rebbe learns the Makkah, the Yid had natural water.
Why is the Rebbe learning the Makkah like this? Like, what's the point? What's the topic? What's the context of the Sifa? Yeah, but what's the context of the Sifa?
It's two different
He's not trying to
Sifas.
answer this question.
No.
So
In number 18, he's talking about the Shemesh Begiven. He's talking about different types of miracles.
Yeah, so we did that.
In number 19, he's discussing Rashi's understanding of the Makkah of the blood.
Is that the same sikh as before?
No, three different sikhs. It's not the sikhs now. Number 6 was from Chele Yud Aleph, 19 was Lamed Aleph, 18 was from Toshin Nun Aleph. Three different sikhs.
Right.
But
why?
Because at the end of the 7 days.
What's the point the Rebbe's bringing
because
out?
Because the pasuk says that at the end of the 7 days, the Ya'ur was back to normal. By the other Makos, you see that Moshe,
Had to reverse it.
the Abish had to
Pray.
do something to remove.
Right.
Here, there's no description of anything happening, because you know why? All that had to happen was for Hashem to stop the magic
So
trick.
that's what the Rebbe's bringing
Right?
out.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
The Rebbe also wants to know, because Rashi says by Dam that the Makkah was lasting for 7 days. No, it didn't. It was 1 second. It turned to blood. The result was 7 days. Rebbe says no. The Abish was doing it
Not
for
like he
7
turned
days.
everything into a
Exactly.
That last word.
Right. Mishameshes. That it was continuous.
Spectacular.
But based on that, we have an answer to our question, a beautiful answer, that the Jews had natural water in their hands.
And did it poison, like you said, the water? Did that go back? Did the water become all of a sudden like the water?
The blood,
Yeah.
so
Well,
the devil